Hi, and welcome to the Movie Health Podcast, a conversational show about movies for mental health. In each episode, we'll interview healthcare professionals about their favourite movies and tips for mental health and see where it takes us. In episode 2, we're talking with Lisa Bahar. Lisa is a licensed psychotherapist in Newport Beach, California, and a professor of psychology at Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Education and Psychology. Lisa has a Bachelor of Arts in Cinema Television Production from the University of Southern California and a Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology from Pepperdine University. Lisa has been practicing merging her background in cinema with the practice of therapy through a process called cinema therapy, where she uses film stories to help her clients' health from the challenges associated with mental health and well-being. Welcome to the Movie Health Podcast, Lisa.
Well, thank you so much, AJ. I'm so happy to be here and also be a part of the listening community as well. So look forward to talking to you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, here to learn about your favorite movie and tips for mental health. So I know it's a difficult question, but what is your favorite movie?
For our conversation, I would love to talk about Rebel Without a Cause.
Sure. And I must mention that I hadn't seen Rebel Without a Cause, but when I did watch it, I thought of Back to the Future. James Dean within Rebel. What's his character's name?
Jim.
Yeah, they really stretched it there, didn't they? But
yeah, that's a big. Yeah.
Jim didn't like to be called Chicken, nor does Marty McFly. So I think
no kidding.
I think they pulled that from. It's funny where the source material comes or the inspiration comes for the for other films as well. So I thought of Back to the Future immediately when I saw that scene.
No kidding. That is so interesting.
Yeah. So Rebel Without a Cause, 1955,
yes.
famously starring James Dean. I think probably one of his last movies, if not his second last movie, tragically, of that year. Directed by Nicholas Ray, and written by Stuart Stern and Irving Schulman. And also Nicholas Ray is credited for writing the film. 1955, certainly, a period of time where James Dean was a mega movie star. I'm not entirely sure what age he was, but it was, it's very obvious when you watch the movie how charismatic and movie star-ish he is. And he would have certainly gone on to make some other great films. But yeah, tell me about what Rebel Without a Cause means to you and why it's one of your favorite movies.
Well, it's timeless, in my opinion. It's a coming of age film where, people are going through the adolescent stage of development and they're discovering who they are and the sense of belonging, and then also old enough to recall and remember certain aspects of their lives that have already impacted them, traumatic events, whether it's abandonment or family dynamics or just overall identity and who they are and what they're discovering about themselves. And I've always enjoyed the film. It comes from family, and my mom was the one who introduced it to me early on. At the time, I was watching Breakfast Club. That was my era of coming of age. Yeah. But she said, boy, this looks like, when she watched Breakfast Club, she said, oh, this is like Rebel Without a Cause from my lifetime. And I thought, oh, well, let's take a look at that. And I did, and I fell in love with the film, and I've loved it ever since.
Yeah, and there's also fair to say, rebellion within the film. The film starts with Jim drunk and disorderly, lying on the road playing with a monkey, and then ends up in jail. And
Yeah.
it's hard to decipher what's actually happening within the movie. But once the key characters are established, you
Mhm.
certainly understand, as you mentioned, that there is a struggle with these individuals as young people.
Mhm.
Uh, Assume they're in college, sort of teenage year or senior college. I always get confused on what the American schooling system is. I imagine it's
Mhm.
college kids. What age would they be? The
They're
characters,
high school kids,
high school.
actually.
There you go.
So more of
Yeah.
a senior, maybe junior, senior age, but they're actually in high school. And the film does depict the high school and a significant part of the high school experience.
Yeah, and that coming of age
Mm.
is an interesting point as well. Difficult time in everyone's lives where you're trying to figure out your own identity.
Mhm.
Learning about your interests, trying to sort of, sh- I don't know, trying to find direction in life.
Mhm.
Um, any particular scenes or characters within the movie that I suppose you connected with back then when you first watched it?
Well, I appreciated how you brought the initial scene of when Jim's on the street and then taken to the police department. He was drunk and disorderly, and an example of teenage rebellion, or families might consider that delinquent behavior. But it also is a catalyst for how these characters, like you said, how Judy and Plato, they all come into play in this police station, and that's where they meet and where the connection begins.
Mm,
They're coming from very diverse backgrounds, and yet there's a similarity there that they are all sharing, which is this rebelling against the authority of parental control or feeling out of control, and where they find themselves in a police station, which is the platform to the beginning of the unraveling of the story. So that scene that you mentioned was, I thought, very significant.
yeah, structurally, it's a very important scene, uh, and you said it so eloquently and articulately, a lot better than I just gave it justice. But you're right; it is a very fundamental part of the film, and
Mhm.
it does set off their relationship throughout the film.
Mhm.
I certainly picked up on sort of the individual or the diversity of those three characters.
Mhm.
And as we go through the movie, as I mentioned, the reference to Back to the Future, but I would also say that um, well, I certainly picked up on the reference with Back to the Future where Jim's called a chicken,
Mhm.
and he certainly doesn't like being called a chicken, and they fall into having a knife fight, which is pretty extreme
Mhm.
for high school kids. But also
Mhm.
that iconic scene of the car chase,
Mhm.
fairly dramatic car scene, but iconic in the sense of having the female character in the middle of the two cars and waving
Mhm.
them off as they drive off towards a cliff, I think it
Mhm.
is. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, the I suppose the relationship with parents as well.
Mhm.
So all three of the characters have different relationships with their parents. Is there anything you
Mhm.
can talk to there as well?
Well, I appreciate what you described as the word of chicken, and how that word triggers, if you will, the
Mm,
reaction in Jim to respond to the other kids that he's adjusting to. This is a particular vulnerability link for him, that leads, like you were describing, to the parenting or the family dynamics because of the parents, their parental interactions with each other. His father was a very passive character, um, who his Jim's mother was dominating, and Jim really struggled with not having a role model that represented and this is where we can get into gender role analysis if we wanted to go that direction, but somebody that was not a model to Jim in those times, if not into our present times, of standing up for himself or having that more of that developing manhood opportunity to look to his father for, and therefore he compensated for that. But his father represented a chicken in relation to his mother. And so these were dynamics that are subconscious that take place, but it can influence a young man's life when his father is being dominated by his mother, which plays a significant role in this word chicken, because Jim was very vulnerable to being called that because he did not like that part of his father.
Mm.
And so that's why that came up as well. There's other reasons for that in prior schools that Jim was attending to that was alluded very delicately, very subtly, that came up. But that word chicken was a big word. You had, I think I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. No. It's interesting that you mentioned the specific relationship with Jim and his father. There's a particular scene where I think Jim has been out and he comes home and his father's actually tending to his mother, and he's wearing an apron, and he drops a tray of food, and he's picking up the food as Jim comes up to the stairs, and I think maybe disgust is probably too strong of a word, but there is sort of disappointment in Jim, the way he's perceiving his father. That's probably a slightly dated concept. You know, the perception that the father needs to be, you know, a strong man and not serve, you know, not sort of waiting on his mother. The needs of Jim at that age, to see his father in a certain way and have that sort of support from his father at a certain age was really important to him. And I can imagine at Jim's age, certainly within the movie, he finds it difficult to communicate and articulate how he feels and what he needs, which is interesting. Which also brings us to the Judy character as well, which is a different dynamic, but one again about the father. So Judy, the primary or the lead female character, who's also at high school and tends to be a love interest of Jim. Judy has an interesting relationship with her father as well.
Yes, she does. So she's coming of age as well, and the feelings of rejection from her father and how she's dealing with that as she's going into womanhood, and how her father responds to her is very different than what he perhaps did in the past. Now there's complexities to that relationship because there's some subtle nuances there that would suggest that the father might be having challenges with knowing that his daughter's going to be going out with boys, or keeping an eye on the door when she's there or not, or learning how to adjust to a young woman coming into her womanhood, are maybe conversations that are not always explored on how that might feel as a father. There also could be other areas that may be going on there between Judy in the past and her relationship with her father, but it's not directly explored in the film. What is explored visually is this rejection that Judy feels, and feelings of that he is not responding to her in the way that he did, and her seeking attention from him through these rebellious acts, and also just through her behaviors of dress or lip color. All are very sexualized, but these are not unusual. But we could also look at them if that it is something to explore further, which I would say these are not unusual behaviors. On the other hand, they could be something that could be read into that dynamic has something more to it. But the the real piece there is this rejection that Judy feels from her father.
Mm. And again, I imagine a difficult time for both Judy, who by the way is Natalie Wood. I think
Mhm.
quite famously, West Side Story
Mhm.
was a film that she did later on.
Mhm.
Um, so very sort of iconic um, 50s
Mhm.
actress.
Mhm.
So I can imagine, just as you said, the visual aspect of that would have been difficult for a father to manage. And so there's both struggles on Judy's side and Judy's father's side of how they manage that relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that brings us to, I suppose, the third uh, lead character, let's call it, which is Plato
Mhm.
Crawford, which we actually do see at the start of the film.
Mhm.
He's there with a carer, and he's in trouble with the police for a particular um,
Mhm.
scenario, but very obviously he's doesn't have his parents around.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I suppose the contrast to Jim and Judy, there is
Mhm.
no parents
Mhm.
in Plato's world. So
Mhm.
anything you could talk to about the Plato character?
Yes, Plato is he's somebody that, like you said, has a very distant father who is one that is absent, sends the monthly check, the mother that is not present, and he's also uh, spends most of any kind of parental role is through the caregiver or the live-in person who takes care of the home. But he has more of these deeper mental health areas that he has a history of mental illness that is explored in the film. Whether it's rabbits killing animals, these sorts of things are all high aggression of a disturbed and neglected person who has gone through some serious abandonment. So he's falling in line with these suicidal thoughts, um, fear. There's identity crisis as to whether or not he's homosexual or he's not. He's attracted to Jim because of his fatherly relationship with that he develops with Jim. He looks up to Jim. Um, he also tries to create a family with Jim and Judy when they go to the observatory, for example, or they go to an abandoned mansion that he's aware of. But he's a character that really is very pivotal on how he brings Jim and Judy together and how they all connect. But he's deeply, deeply disturbed and troubled and is a highly vulnerable character in the film.
Mm. And along with Plato, Jim is um, antagonized um, by the
Mhm.
goons. So
Mhm.
there's the goons as the bad guys of the film that
Mhm.
sort of are consistent throughout, that are always challenging
Mhm.
Jim and Plato.
Mhm.
Judy's mixed up with the
Mhm.
goons as well. Quite
Mhm.
interestingly, great and
Mhm.
late Dennis Hopper is one of the goons.
Mhm.
I thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
Given the context of Rebels,
Right.
without a cause, I thought that it's certainly, I think it's one of his first films actually.
Yeah.
Dennis
Mhm.
Hopper, he looks very young as one of the
Mhm.
goons, but I think probably from that experience playing a goon, that flowed through to his, his the Easy Rider film in 1969, and that contributed to the new wave of film. But there is this the goon force within the movie, which is
Mhm.
important,
Mhm.
um, pushing both Jim and more so Plato into, ends up being the net result of the movie. Is that sort
Mhm.
of fair to say?
Yeah, it's interesting the way you put that. That the goons, as you say, or the bullies, how they push you into your next level, either to stand up for yourself or uh, create a connection to what matters. Judy was a part of that, but then she discovers Jim and she's attracted to Jim and who he is because he's somebody who knows himself and he's willing to stand outside the atypical groupthink bullying goons, which has its own level of power through numbers, but Jim represents lack of number. He's a solo artist. He runs on his own integrity. He has his own moral standing, and Judy responds to that. And Jim actually challenges Judy, like, why do you hang around this kind of company? And so she finds herself interested in his individuality, his ability to stand on his own 2 feet and do what's right, which comes up in the film as well. And Plato's also attracted to that about him. And he's got a very soft side to him, meaning that he's tender and understanding to somebody like Plato, who would be considered an outcast or an easy target. And he welcomes that relationship and is not scared to stand by somebody who is, on the as an outcast. So these are all signs of strength, and without the protagonist or the antagonist of the goons, people don't always discover these elements about themselves. They don't realize who they are until sometimes they're pushed. Of course, not to one's self-injury, but unfortunately, these things happen. But nevertheless, they share with us the value of having the bullies in life are that they push us into becoming who we are. We either become a bully or we become somebody who's willing to face the bully and stand on your own 2 feet. Because bullies, their only value is numbers, really. They need each other. You try to get one bully alone, they become very vulnerable. They're very weakened by that. So
No, I just agree that sort of structurally within
mm-hmm.
the movie, the bullies are there to propel and
Mm-hmm.
challenge the Jims and the Judys and the Plato,
Mm-hmm.
and once the bullies antagonized to a point, they've sort of set up the characters for that the final act, the scene at the planetarium.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Also, I'd like to mention, and I probably should have mentioned at the start, but some really iconic moments within Rebel Without a Cause that some people may pick up on, and certainly encourage everyone to see the movie. Is the scene within the police station.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Jim character says or screams out, "You're tearing me apart," which is sort of the first sign that he's struggling, and he's frustrated, or he has angst with the relationship with his father. That tearing me apart also appears in a movie which is dubbed to be the one of the worst movies ever made, which is called The Room. I'm not sure if you've seen that. Have you seen that, Lisa?
It sounds so familiar, and my mind went to a film, but I don't think it's The Room. Can you tell me what The Room is about?
2003. It's directed and written by Tommy Wiseau. Let's just go with that. It's an independent film, and it's famous just because of its I suppose his incoherent story. But basically, you have to see it to to believe it and to live it.
Yeah, I might have seen it. Okay,
but within to his I suppose his girlfriend within the movie is, "You're tearing me apart, Lisa," and he screams it, and because Tommy is noticeably not a trained actor.
Uh-huh.
That is one of the laugh out loud moments within the movie. So I just thought it was interesting that there's sort of
That's interesting.
synergies
Yes.
between between Rebel Without a Cause talking to you today, and also the movie The Room, which it's a laugh.
I would love to talk about that tearing apart Lisa.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like that.
sure.
Uh, in that point, from what I recall in that scene, that is when his dad would say something, his mom would say something, and then he said they would all switch up again.
Mm.
Um, and so that has a lot of that emotional. It's like kind of a psychological term, but maybe some listeners are aware of it. Is this whole gaslighting part
Yeah, oh, yeah.
where your reality is consistently being questioned, like you said that wait, you said what, you said that, no, you're tearing me apart. That's this experience of how that gaslight, questioning your reality, you don't know who you are, everybody is shifting perspectives, and it can tear a person apart, which comes a lot with family dynamics and relationships. But I'll check out the Room. I mean, I used to watch independent films all the time in the theater,
Mm.
so I'm surprised I don't. I When you said it, it was like, do I know that movie? But I'll check
Yeah,
it out.
you may have seen it and then forgotten
Okay,
it,
okay,
but yeah, no, not to take anything away from your point. That tearing me apart is also probably a call for help, and that
yes,
call for help was done
good point.
very early on in the movie, and the relationship between Jim and his father doesn't get any better,
Hmm.
and it's also a continuous theme throughout
Hmm.
Rebel Without a Cause.
Hmm.
Um, so Lisa, thank you so much for talking about Rebel Without a Cause. I'm sure there is a lot more to dig into it, but I really enjoyed watching it. It is timeless. It's classic. James Dean is, a gorgeous human being, just such a perfect movie star. Is tragic that he died soon after the movie. So I highly recommend the movie. Really good to watch, and lots of key themes to take out of it. Um,
Yes.
so so talking about mental health, I think we have talked about certainly some themes of mental health, and mental illness within um, Rebel Without a Cause. But from your experience, what are some tips for mental health that you could give the listeners today?
All right. Well, tips for mental health. Well, the first part is, I would say, is that uh, begin with the basics, which would be a what would be defined as a self-care plan, but these are the basics of being able to get nutrition, um, exercise, and sleep, avoiding mood altering substances, uh, eh, eh, with if possible. I mean, I understand the reasonable aspect of all this through social interactions, but mood altering all substances, particularly if you're vulnerable, um, as people are moving into the next phase of life after the pandemic. There's a lot of trailing issues that continue to influence people, and although many are moving forward, there's still some people who are struggling. So I would say avoid that. Building mastery is a big part of mental health, and what I mean by that is learning something new. It doesn't mean it has to be a big significant aspect of learning, but something small each day. It could be as, maybe just learning something new in terms of a different kind of recipe, or learning
Mhm.
something new on trying something that you wouldn't normally do on a typical day. If you can be mindful of that, doing that is very helpful to create positive aspects in the mind and the body. I would say that one of the most significant part of mental health is having some kind of connection with spirituality or your faith or your religion that will keep you grounded, that you are comfortable with, that you can relate to. And if you haven't discovered that, uh, consider exploring. Maybe that would be a building mastery exercise of exploring these aspects of life, because we're living in a world that's transforming into a lot of different directions, particularly with technological innovation, which leans away from that whole interconnection with connection with self and spiritual aspects of self and understanding. The other areas I would say would be to have relationships with people and learning how to cultivate that. And that's not always easy. People are dealing with social media, interactions through technology has taken people a step away. So going backwards, it was interesting. I was at a conference this past week, the Milken Institute conference, and I was very interested to hear how the global leaders of today are talking about technology and technological innovation, and yet I was expecting it to be all about the metaverse and how we're going to interface with AI and cobots and so on and so forth and smart cities and all this stuff. And the irony of it all is that the leaders were talking about the value of humanity and how important it is for people to feel connected to other people directly through contact, in person experiences versus technology,
Mm.
and the value of going backwards in that area before this technological age takes control and we lose ourselves in it. So I would say
Mm.
that's a big part of mental health and being aware of that. And of course, asking for help. That's a sign of courage and strength, of listening to podcasts like this that are inspiring to you or of interest to you. Maybe that's building mastery, or just being able to seek out people who can help you, whether it's through a hotline or seeing a therapist if that's comfortable for you, or joining a group that might talk about these things that um, we're now in an age where people don't stigmatize mental health as much as they used to. I'm not saying they don't still, but there's a lot more openness about the value of mental health. And podcasts like these and other podcasts really enhance that. And that's where, by the way, technology is helpful, as if you can secure yourself with resources and communities of finding that to support you on your journey of life. I hope that helps you.
No, very helpful. Thank you. Practical.
Mm.
Lots of different options there. I can certainly relate to many of them. There is that, spirituality. Linking that back to movies. There is for me something spiritual about watching movies. That's
Mm-hmm.
just my sort of personal take, and
Mm-hmm.
I sort of joke about my local cinema being my church. I
Mm,
say
I
to my
see
wife,
that.
I'm going to go to the church, and she knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so, as you said, depending on what you're comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging it and being self-aware of those tips for mental health is really important. Very important to go outside and
Mm-hmm.
do something with a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
and it may or may not be going to see a movie at a cinema. But
That's
that's one of
right.
my personal favorites.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lisa, thank you so much for your time.